Hello everyone. In this recording, we are going to work through an application problem which involves finding areas and volumes. I'm first going to read through the question given here, look at the information, and then we'll try to understand what we need to solve about this question, right? So it says here, City Park has a circular flower garden in the middle of a rectangular grassy field. The grassy field is 50 feet long and 24 feet wide. The circular flower garden in the center of the field has a radius of 6 feet, and the flower bed is 2 feet above the ground. All right, so now that we have read it once, before we go into the questions, let's spend a little more time trying to understand the layout, all right, of what they are talking about, of the garden, so to speak. I'm going to draw a diagram. If we have a picture before us, it'll be easier to understand what we should solve, what we should be solving, and how to go about solving it. All right? So I'm going to draw a diagram now based on the information provided to us. All right. So it says here City Park has a circular flower garden in the middle of a rectangular grassy field. So they're talking about a city park. So let me just draw an outline or the boundary line of a park. Let's call this the city park perimeter. And then inside the city park is a rectangular grassy field. All right, so it's a rectangular shaped grassy field within the perimeter of the park. So I'm going to now draw a rectangular shape. All right, so here is our rectangle. Let me try to draw a proper rectangle here. All right, so this is our grassy field. And then it says in the middle of the rectangular grassy field is a circular flower garden. All right, so there is a circular shaped flower garden inside the rectangle, in the middle of the rectangle. So let me pull up the circle and try to draw a circle here. Right, so here's our circle, and let me pull that inside the rectangle. All right, so I'm going to label this. Here's our city park. All right, so here's the park, and then this is the field, right? This is the field, the rectangular field, and then we have the flower bed. All right, so here's the flower bed, or the flower garden as they call it, flower garden. So now we have the layout of the park and the garden and so on. Let's try to put in the dimensions. All right, so the grassy field is 50 feet long and 24 feet wide. All right, so it's 50 feet and then 24 feet wide. And then it says the circular flower garden in the center of the field has a radius of 6 feet. So let's try to show the radius here. All right, and the radius starts from the center of the circle all the way to the circumference. All right, so let me try to draw a straight line here. So here we go. So from the center of the circle all the way to the circumference, this distance is 6 feet, correct? And then there's another piece of information. It says the flower bed is 2 feet above the ground. So it is a raised garden, so to speak. All right, so there is a height associated to the circular flower garden or the flower bed. And whenever we add height to a circle, all right, so let's just try to draw the height, give it a height, or all right, so whenever we add height to any circular figure, it becomes what's called a cylinder, a cylindrical shape. All right, and that height is 2 feet. So let's write that down. 2 feet. So now that we have the picture labeled with all the dimensions and everything, we are going to go and look into the questions that we need to answer. All right. Now let's go on to solving the first part of the question. It says find the area of the grassy field around the flower garden. All right, so the key word here is around the flower garden. That means you should not include the area of the flower garden. It's asking for all this area, and let me shade this here, all this area outside, within the rectangle, but outside of the flower garden. All right, all this area we need to find. Okay, so how do we go about finding this area around the flower garden? We know the dimensions of the entire rectangle here. All right, so the entire rectangle is 50 by 24 feet. So if we find the area of the entire rectangle and from it subtract the area of the circular garden, we will get the area outside or around the garden, correct? So let me write that down. So the area, all right, area around the garden would be area, the total area of the field, let's say. Let's write it down. Let's be more specific. Total area of the rectangle minus the area of the garden, area of garden. All right, so we can find the total area of the rectangle. Area of the rectangle goes with the formula L times W, correct? So length is 50 feet, the width is 24, right? 50 by 24. So we multiply the length times width and we get a value of 1200 square feet. 1200 square feet. So let's write 1200 for the area, total area of the rectangle. Now we have to find the area of the circular garden. So we use the formula to find the area of a circle. So let's write that here. Area of circle is given by pi r squared, correct? So r, the radius is 6 feet. So we have to square that and we'll end up with pi times 6 squared, which is 36 pi, correct? So let's write 36 pi and subtract them. All right, so you have to multiply the 36 by the value of pi. You can use your calculators and that should come to, I think, let me do the calculation here on my calculator. It should come to 113.10 rounded up. All right, so 1200 minus 1130 will give us the area around the garden, and that would be 1086.9. All right, approximately. So the area around the garden is 1086.9, but what are the units that we use here? It's square feet. All right, you have to qualify it with the proper units because it's the area, it's going to be square something. So 1086.90 square feet is the area of all this yellow region inside the rectangle but outside of the circular garden. All right. So now let's look at the next part of the question, which is asking find the amount of soil needed to fill the raised flower bed. So here we have the raised flower bed and the question is how much we can fill, how much soil we can fill into the raised flower bed. So whenever the question is asking us how much we can put into something, how much material we can put into a container, then we are talking about not just 2 dimensions, we are talking about 3 dimensions. All right, so whatever container we are trying to fill up, whether it's a cylindrical shaped container or a pyramid shaped container or a conic shaped container, it better have a height or a depth for us to be able to fill it up with something. All right, so in this case, this cylindrical shaped flower bed has height associated it. It's a raised bed. It is above the ground, so it has a certain height, which in this case is 2 feet. So whenever we fill up something, whenever we work with filling up a 3-dimensional figure, then we are actually looking for the volume, not the area, but the volume, and volume involves 3 dimensions. All right, so I'm going to write here that what we are looking for here is the volume of the flower bed, of the raised flower bed. And because the flower bed is cylindrical in shape, the formula to find the volume is pi r squared and h, where h is the height of the cylindrical flower bed. All right, so we have to factor in the 3rd dimension here, which is the height. And once we know what the formula is of the particular shape that we are filling in, then just plug in the values. All right, so the volume would be pi multiplied by r squared. So r is the radius, which is 6 feet, and we have to square that. So it's going to be 6 squared, and the height is 2 feet, so multiplied by 2. And when we complete the multiplication, it's going to be 6 squared, 36 times 2 is 72 pi. And when you multiply that out using your calculator, you should get a value of 226.20. Now the units are going to be cubic feet. All right, so for volume, the units are in cubic feet or cubic unit. So if it's in inches, then it's going to be cubic inches. If it's in meters, it will be cubic meters or cubic centimeters. So volume is always has cubic to its units. All right, so this is how we are going to answer this question, saying that the amount of soil needed to fill the raised flower bed is 226.20 cubic feet. All right. Now the last part of the question is asking, if the flower garden were to be fenced around with wire, how many feet of wire fence would be needed? All right, so they are looking into surrounding the flower bed, the cylindrical circular shaped flower bed with a wire fence all around. So they want to know what length of the fence, what is the length of a wire fence that would be required to do the job, right? Now, whenever we talk about fencing something, whether it's a rectangular shaped figure or a square shaped figure or a circular shaped figure, we are talking about the perimeter, because the fence goes all around a certain shape. In this case, the fence will go all around the circular shape. So if we can find the perimeter, which is for a circle referred to as the circumference of the circle, then that will tell us what length of fence we would require. All right, so that's what we are going to do here. Let's write down here what we are looking for really is the perimeter, or because we are working with a circle, it's going to be the circumference of this flower bed. And the formula that goes for the to find the circumference of a circle is 2 times pi times r. So now that we know the formula, all we need to do is plug in the appropriate values for the variables. Recall that pi is a constant value. It is not a variable. Pi is a constant value, but r is the variable here which we need to fill in with a value. So the radius of the circular flower bed is 6. That's what r is. So let's write this. The circumference is going to be 2 times pi times 6, which is going to be equal to 12 pi. And when we perform the calculation using a calculator, we should come up with a value of 37.70 feet rounded up. All right, so the length of the wire fence needed to surround the flower bed would be 37.70 feet. Now, keep in mind when we are talking about perimeters, circumferences, the units is just going to be feet because it's just one dimension, a single dimension. We are just talking about the length in a perimeter or in a circumference. Therefore, it's not going to be square feet. It's not going to be cubic feet. We are not dealing with areas or volume. We are just dealing with perimeter, which is the length all around a certain shape. All right. So the answer is going to be that 37.70 feet a wire fence would be needed to fence the flower garden.